From the studios of KENW on the campus of Eastern New Mexico University, it's You Should Know, featuring the people and events of Eastern New Mexico and West Texas.
Welcome to You Should Know. I'm your host, Evelyn Ledbetter, and my guest today is Dr. James Jim Constantopoulos. So, Dr. C.
Yes, that's what my students call me, right.
Because I don't want to, I always mess it up. So, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You actually are a professor here at Eastern.
Yes, I've been here 35 years.
Okay. Well, let's dig back in a little deeper. So, starting out, born in Massachusetts?
Yes, born in Gloucester, Massachusetts, which is an old fishing port. And then in the mid-60s, the family moved to Southern California. And we had a neighbor who was an engineer. And one year for my birthday, he gave me some minerals and a mineral book. And that was, that set the stage for everything. And then when I was in high school, well, actually, let's go back to junior high school.
Okay.
We had to do a career search and write a paper on a career. And I chose mining engineering of all things because I just love that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
In high school, I took a geology class that was taught by a geologist, and that was it.
You were hooked.
I was hooked, yeah. So after high school, I enrolled at California State University, Northridge, to work on my bachelor's in geology. And while I was there, I got to do some cool stuff. Spent a summer in Houston at the Johnson Space Center working on a Mars project.
Very nice.
And towards the end of my undergrad career, I worked in marine geophysics. We were doing seismic surveys off the coast of California for fault hazards and for siting offshore oil platforms. So that was neat and everything, but I wanted to go into hard rock geology and mining and economic geology, which is the study of mineral deposits.
Okay.
So I enrolled at the University of Idaho College of Mines and Earth Resources and went there for my master's. And when I was finishing up my master's, the industry was in the dumps. People were being laid off. And so I decided to stay on for my PhD. And while I was working on my PhD, I got to do a lot of teaching, which I really enjoyed. I worked in the Coeur d'Alene Mining District in northern Idaho, which is a historic silver mining district. So I've been over a mile underground, which is quite the experience.
That's a ways down.
That's a ways down, yeah. You really appreciate the working conditions and how hard these guys work to get us silver.
I bet that's right.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I worked during the summers in mineral exploration in Idaho and in Nevada. And when I was getting ready to graduate, I decided that I really wanted to go into academia. So I applied to Eastern and I was hired in 1989.
Very nice.
Yes.
Very nice. Well, one of our employees here, he said he took your class.
Yes.
I'm borrowing Justin's line. He said, "You rock."
I love it.
There
Love it.
So throw some humor out. Well, I've read your articles in the paper, and you've written those on for quite some time, and always
Yes.
find them very fascinating. And so when the market just wasn't there to that allowed you to go on and get your doctorate and then start working.
Yes.
So this has been a good fit for you working here, but you
Yeah.
actually worked in the industry
Yes.
for some time also.
Yes.
Okay. Because the professors I had were always better that had boots on the ground before they stepped in the classroom.
Yeah, when you bring that experience to the classroom, yeah, I think it really helps.
Well, and I know from your articles and just from our discussions, a big part of what you focus on is the rare earth elements.
Correct.
And the abbreviation, the REE.
REEs, right.
Walk us through exactly what they, an idea of what they are and what their importance is.
Okay.
Let's start there.
Sure.
There's a lot of data. We could go for hours,
Go on
but
and
we
on,
won't.
right.
I promise we won't.
So the rare earth elements are a group of 17 elements in the periodic table.
Okay.
The colored ones are the rare earth elements, and we divide them into the light rare earth elements and the heavy rare earth elements. And these are important in many applications in modern technology. Basically, everything that you use every day has rare earth elements in it, from your cell phone to your car, your computer, your television at home. The rare earth elements are just incredibly important to us. But the big push these days is for making magnets. The magnets go into everything that has a motor, basically, and that includes stuff like electric vehicles, wind turbines. That's the big push right now
Wow.
because of the green energy push. The issue is that China controls the resource.
And so that's when you start drilling down into what that really means. Um, at some point, we actually mined these elements. We had much more mining in the United States.
Well, during the 60s, 70s, and 80s, we were the leader in rare earth elements, but we only had one mine in California, and that mine was shut down because of environmental concerns. It has since reopened, but in the meantime, China picked up the slack. They have the world's largest reserves of rare earth elements. They have 38% of the world's reserves in rare earth elements.
I know there was a chart that shows this is a really
Yes,
good example, right,
this one here, right.
of exactly
So they
the
have
amount,
38. So they have 38%
which
of,
is this huge area at the top,
right,
right?
right,
Okay.
44 million tons. Vietnam is the second most important country. They have 22 million tons, but their resource has not yet really been developed like it has in China. And if you go around the circle, you'll see that the United States has just 1.5 million tons.
And the reason for the mining to have left
Well,
the US?
the one mine in California was a Mountain Pass mine,
Mhm.
and that was shut down because of environmental concerns. Extracting rare earths requires a lot of chemistry. Because they occur together in the periodic table, separating them is very difficult, and it takes a lot of heat and chemistry. Basically, it's a thermochemical um, type of process to separate them. Just this week, Cornell University announced that they have developed a bacterium that will selectively leach out rare earth elements, and that would be very clean, wouldn't have the environmental footprint that the traditional methods have.
Because of all the chemicals and things that are, yeah.
Right,
But the
right.
mining is just so expensive,
Oh, yeah.
just crazy.
Oh, absolutely. These days, to develop a new mine, you're looking at hundreds of millions of dollars. A large mine, well over $1 billion. And this is not something, like when you open a business, you buy a building and you open a
Uh-huh.
business. With mines, it takes 7 to 10 years to permit them. That's just the permitting part. Before that, you have years of exploration, boots on the ground, different types of
Mhm.
surveys, sampling, drilling. That alone takes several years. And
And the investors to get people to even buy into this when it's such a long-term return on your
oh,
money.
yeah, it's not for the squeamish.
Right. And if the market changes and the product isn't worth as much, there's not any revenue coming in. And
Exactly. Well,
so,
a great example of that is the Idaho cobalt operation in the mountains of central Idaho. Last fall, they developed this mine to the point of opening. They had the ambassador from Australia, all these dignitaries come out, had a ribbon cutting ceremony,
mhm.
and they were like right there to start production. Price of cobalt went from $40 a pound to $15 a pound, and they had to put the opening of the mine on hold.
And so if you don't have something in place that guarantees a price, how do you get people to invest and to go through this work and maybe not even
Exactly.
getting permitted depending on what the environmental regulations are going to be at that point in time?
Right, right.
And the politics does play into it of
Oh,
who is in office and what way the world is swinging.
exactly. Um, they have received quite a bit of money from the federal government, so they are continuing to explore in the surrounding area, which is good. And there's a bill in Congress that might establish a floor price for commodities and to help support the production of these critical minerals that are important for our economy.
Well, something you had touched on and in our discussions on the magnetic, that's a huge piece of military, correct?
Oh, absolutely. How does a plane fly? Well, it uses these actuators that use rare earth elements, the heads-up display, the night vision goggles, all of that uses rare earth elements, the electronics in the planes, missiles, drones, all that sort of stuff relies on uh, rare earth elements. It's incredibly important. It's vital for our military,
For our national
for
security.
our national security, right. The F-35 fighter has 760 pounds of rare earth elements in it.
And can you give an estimate of how much mining it takes to, I mean, that's just tons and tons of material to get
Oh,
to those elements.
exactly, right. Well, when you consider that the concentration of these elements in the ground is measured in parts per million.
Well, and that's something I had asked you just a few minutes ago. I'd
Mhm.
read that you always think of rare earth, that means that you don't have much of it. But that's not the case, right?
Correct. They call them rare earths because they occur in such small concentrations.
Whereas in gold or something, you have a vein and it's much greater right there in one spot. But getting
Right.
this
If
out,
it's a vein type deposit, but there are mines in California, in Nevada rather, where we mine gold at a about an less a tenth of an ounce per ton.
well, we all watch those shows where they're in Alaska or wherever and the amount of
Right.
earth moving that's going on.
Right.
So, from your viewpoint, when all of this has been outsourced, the regulations in China and other countries, and the humanitarian part of that, of how people are treated when they are mining,
Mhm.
do the cleanup afterwards, are those done the same level as we have here?
Oh, absolutely not. We have the strictest environmental laws and the strictest labor laws in the world. And a lot of countries, cobalt is a great example.
Hmm.
And this has come out in the news over the last several years. Most of our cobalt comes from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and there are images of children handpicking through piles of rock to find the cobalt ore. I have a video that I show my students of children in India climbing through mountains to pick up little scraps of mica that are used as insulators in electronics. It's absolutely horrible, and why we don't see that and be more positive and proactive in developing mines in this country is kind of mind-boggling.
I've heard a phrase before. It's called NIMBY, not in my backyard.
Not in my backyard,
And
right?
so, as long as we have that cell phone or whatever piece of technology or anything we use,
Mhm.
if it's available, we have it, but we don't have to look behind the curtain and see how it came about.
Exactly. Um, a great example of the NIMBY
Hmm.
thing is there are some really amazing deposits of copper, nickel, and platinum group elements in Minnesota. But because of where they are located and the strong environmental movement there, it's questionable whether these mines will ever be developed.
So, and I know you were talking about there's one mine in Gunnison, Colorado.
Well, it's actually not a mine,
It okay,
but
deposit.
it's a deposit. Yes. This is a sample from it. This is the Iron Hill carbonatite, and this is an example of what we call a hard rock type of rare earth element deposit. It contains about 1,900 parts per million in rare earth elements. It's rich in cerium, which is not used in batteries, so that's why it's not all that desirable. Cerium is used in polishing, so optical glass, anything, even marble and granite countertops use
But
cerium oxide
and like
as a
the
polish.
surface of our cell phones, and I'm guessing the visual displays and different things in aircraft, that's all part
Exactly.
of it.
Right, right. It's an important, it traditionally, for a long time, has been an important polishing compound.
And what you told me was that they mine it here, but they don't purify it here, correct?
Right, right. At the Mountain Pass mine, which produces quite a bit of ore each year, the concentrate, which is, after you get rid of the junk and you have the ore minerals
Mhm.
concentrated, that gets shipped to China for processing.
And, they use fossil fuels to get it there?
Of course. Yeah.
And so they ship it to China, they
Hmm.
purify it, and then we're dependent upon China for them to allow it to come back.
And to produce stuff like the magnets that we use. Right. So the Mountain Pass Group has received federal funding to develop their processing facility, and they started processing this spring. So that's a good sign.
Hmm.
And their next step is to build a magnet facility in Texas. So we might have that supply chain return to the United States.
And of course, that would bring jobs and
Absolutely.
and the cleanup on mines, I'm sure that would be much different than how it was 100, even a 50
Oh,
years ago.
absolutely. And that's why mining has such a bad rap because of there were no regulations to control the use of the land and the
Hmm.
disposal of waste and whatnot. But the regulations now are so strict. It's you just can't get by uh, polluting the environment anymore. You
But
know.
it's being polluted somewhere if we receive these elements.
Yes. Yep.
So, um, and of course, my family farms. We
Hmm.
care about the earth and
Oh,
natural
absolutely.
resources and believe in that. But when you
Right.
can take steps to be independent of other countries
Right.
and create
And do it
jobs,
in an environmentally
right?
sound way.
Because literally, it's kind of like strip mining, isn't it? Is the way a lot of this is gathered, or
Well,
how is
actually,
it mined?
what we call open pit
Okay,
mines. Yeah, so they're deep conical mines.
okay.
Yeah,
So just lots of dirt that's gone through to get the amounts of those elements.
right, right. Yeah, well, you can imagine if rare earth elements in a deposit like this occur at 1900 parts per million. You've got to mine a lot of rock to get.
There's not much.
There's not much there.
There's not much there, is there?
Right, right.
It, it just is mind-boggling. And then something else. So the political environment, how does that affect us of getting the elements from other countries?
That's a real issue. There seems to be more of a push to try and outsource these than to really push to develop the industry in this country. Uh, there has been some movement, but it's just moving awfully slow. The federal government had promised, I guess you'd say,
Hmm.
to reduce the permitting time, and we've not seen any significant changes in that.
But when countries aren't getting along, if you choose not to export something, that's a pretty big bargaining chip.
Oh, absolutely. Uh, you know, just in the past several months, China has restricted the export of gallium and germanium, which are important, vital for making microelectronics, for making chips. And they recently restricted the export of graphite, which is used in electronics. It's for stuff like battery leads and contacts and stuff like that. So, and with the rare earth elements, if tensions were to really rise in the South China Sea, they could cut us off.
And
They did
so
it to Japan a number of years ago.
that's that's something to think hard about,
Yes,
very
yes,
hard.
yep.
Well, and there's I know you had provided a map, which is just tremendous on this that shows um, basically our our country doesn't have much happening in it.
Well, this map is showing those countries where we have 50% or more of our net imports coming from. And you can see China and Canada are both colored dark red, which means that 19 to 26 different mineral commodities come from those countries. Of course, Canada, they're our friends.
Hmm.
We have great relations with Canada, but China, again, because of issues with trade and possible conflict,
Hmm.
we could actually be in a world of hurt. It really shows. It's mineral resources are a worldwide commodity, and it's one of the biggest things in economic trade across the world. Brazil, you see, is important.
Hmm.
Other South American countries like Chile, important for stuff like copper. South America is really important, and they're fairly close by. South Africa, platinum, the platinum group metals, which are really important in a variety of applications.
This is a fascinating map, and we actually will have a website that people can go and look at this in greater detail. I know it's pretty
Okay.
small, but it's one of the websites that you had put up that's really fascinating, and take some time and delve into it and
Right.
see on that. Um, I there was a quote that it was talking about. Um, I've kind of lost my place on this, but something to do when we take that away from here. What has that done to the university as far as students? I mean, you're mining. You said that we had lost the geology program at one point here at Eastern,
At
correct?
Eastern, right.
And so,
So we don't have a geology program, but just before they cut the geology program, I kind of saw the writing on the wall,
mhm.
and I developed an environmental science program. It's actually an environmental geology program, but we won't tell
We won't tell.
anybody.
I
Right.
think we just did.
Yeah.
I think you just let the cat out of the bag on that
Right.
one.
So yeah, it's geology heavy, and there's also a number of environmental classes like environmental geochemistry and environmental law, which I really enjoy teaching. And our students, where do they go to work? They go to work down in the Permian Basin in the oil and gas industry. They work in water resources and hazard studies. I even have one student that's working at a copper mine in Arizona. So it's a great degree. They get out there and get jobs.
I think I read that the amount of graduates in geology in the United States was a little over 300.
Mining engineering.
Mining engineering.
Mining engineering. Right.
But last year in China, 5,000. But I mean,
Yep.
if you're mining engineering and you don't have a way to make a living afterwards, you have no incentive to go into that.
Exactly.
So
And when students go to school and say, "Hey, I want to be an engineer," they kind of get lured into that tech sector too. So, there's that big draw there. And it takes a special person to want to be a mining engineer because it's not like mines are located in urban areas.
sure.
There's a huge copper mine um, in outside of Salt Lake City, so that has the advantage of being close to an urban area. But otherwise, you're pretty much out in the boonies.
Just and that probably isn't where most people want to live anymore.
No, no,
Well,
you're right.
we don't have a lot of time, but you had talked about in one of your classes just the amount. You showed a cell phone and all the different components.
Right.
And what was the response that your students had to when you told them the amount of what a cell phone? Were they concerned that did they realize how much of the elements go into just making that cell phone?
They're not aware of how many different elements go in. And the graphic that they actually use shows what country they are sourced from and what percentage we get from that country. And I asked them, is this a concern? And for most of them, they express some concern about it. It's like, wow, I didn't realize that. And, that is concerning. And there are others that, like you had said earlier, it's like, as long as I can go to the store and buy myself a new phone every year or whatever, it doesn't affect me.
And we are very much of a throwaway society,
Oh, absolutely.
and we always want the newest and the techiest. And
Yep.
I watch the students here, and they walk out of class, and not just students, but all of us.
Mhm.
And we walk out of a group, and the first thing you do is you have your phone, which is basically a computer right there in your hands.
Right, right.
But that's fascinating. And you had actually brought a sample of the this is 16 of the rare earth
Yes,
minerals.
in these little glass tubes are the pure rare earth elements, and they're in sealed glass tubes with nitrogen to prevent any oxidation. And they look like just normal metals. And so some of these we use in the pure metal form. In others, we use in what we call an oxide form. So all of those colors you see on your television,
Hmm.
even going back to, the old cathode ray tubes, remember the
Yeah.
big televisions
Hmm.
that we used
Oh
to
yeah.
have, to the modern flat panel displays, your phone, your computer, your laptop, all of those colors are produced by rare earth elements.
And like you said, it's hard to go by without a day, just like plastic or anything else,
Yeah,
without touching but the rare earth elements.
right,
And
right.
we just don't even think about it, just take
Nope.
it for
And we go
granted.
back to black and white.
Oh my gosh. And the defense, I mean, that's a huge concern, and I
Oh,
think
yeah.
maybe just education. Do you think that's a real key piece of just people being aware
Yes, yes. That is the biggest key, is educating the people.
and
And
making them
that's
aware?
why, I emphasize this in a couple of my
Okay.
classes. We touch on all environmental issues, but talking about our resource dependency, I think it's something that everybody really needs to be aware of.
Well, I literally I find your articles interesting and just fascinating and
Well,
just
thank you.
almost to take it upon ourselves, we do need to educate ourselves and be aware and make our own decisions and opinions of what we think or don't think, but
Yes,
just have the knowledge.
absolutely.
So it's I we'll stop on pretty much right there because we could just keep digging forever. But it's been a pleasure to have you on the show and look forward to our viewers digging in and learning a little bit more.
Great. Thank
Well,
you for having me.
thank you so much, Dr. C. I'm not going to
Dr.
say.
C, right?
And to everyone out there watching, we appreciate it, and we will see you next time. Cheers.